When the chief's word fell over the campfire like thunder, Kalon's fate was sealed. He was to guard the one woman he could never desire. The air that evening carried the scent of pine smoke and sage. The Apache camp stretched quietly across the valley floor, tents glowing like faint embers under the deep orange sky. Warriors sharpened blades. Mothers called their children in, and in the center, Chief Nail stood before the fire, a man whose word no one dared question. Kalon stood with his head bowed, his lean frame outlined by the firelight. The flames danced against his woven sash, the red and brown threads flickering like blood and soil. "You will watch her," the chief said. "She's my only child. No harm must come near her." Kalon didn't raise his eyes. He only gave a slow nod. "Yes, chief." The girl he spoke of, Tayen, was no child. She was wild sunlight bottled into a body that refused to be contained. Kalon had seen her before from a distance, walking barefoot near the stream, head held high, long black hair falling in loose waves, her tan cotton dress brushing against her knees as she bent to gather herbs. She had a way of looking at the world as if it owed her something. As if every boundary was a dare, Kalon had sworn himself to discipline and silence. He had seen what desire could destroy, how it could turn warriors into fools and tribes into graves. He carried that lesson like a scar, as much a part of him as the one across his jaw. Yet when the chief's words settled, Kalon knew the task would test him more than battle ever had. That night, as the camp quieted and the wind whispered through cedar branches, Tayen found him by the horses. "You're the one my father sent to follow me," she said, not asking, only accusing. Her tone had the sharp edge of someone too used to being obeyed. Kalon didn't turn. He adjusted a leather strap on the horse's saddle. "Protect you," he corrected. Her steps drew closer. "I don't need protecting." "Then I'll make my task easy." Tayen crossed her arms, studying him. "You really think you can tell me what to do?" Kalon's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I think I can try." For a long moment, silence hung between them, just the sound of crickets and the soft creak of leather as the wind swayed the saddle. Tayen's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret that." She turned sharply and walked toward the stream, barefoot, her headband glinting in the moonlight. Kalon exhaled, his jaw tightening. The chief's command had been simple: watch her. But he already sensed the storm in that task. She wasn't the kind to be watched quietly. Days passed. She went where she pleased, to the woods, to the riverbank, to the sacred cliffs where the tribe painted their visions. Kalon followed at a distance, a shadow between trees. He told himself it was duty, not curiosity. But he noticed things he shouldn't. The way her hands moved delicately when she tied beads onto her dress, the way her laughter echoed differently near water, like it belonged there. Once, she caught him watching and smirked. "See something worth guarding?" He said nothing, but his silence made her grin widen. That evening, as the sky bled into shades of purple and ash, Tayen approached him by the campfire. "My father treats me like I'm a child," she said suddenly. "You don't have to listen to him." "I do," Kalon replied, eyes on the fire. She crouched beside him, the scent of smoke and wildflowers curling between them. "What if I told you not to?" He looked at her then, really looked. Her eyes were dark and steady, the reflection of the fire turning them to amber. For the first time, he realized how dangerous her defiance could be. "You shouldn't test me," he said quietly. "Why not?" "Because I don't fail easily." Tayen's lips curved. "We'll see." She stood and walked away, her silhouette fading into the night. Kalon stared at the ground, the flames crackling in his chest louder than in the pit before him. He knew, then, that the chief had given him an impossible order. To guard her without wanting her, to protect her without reaching for her. And under that vast desert sky, with the stars watching like silent witnesses, Kalon made a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. When the howls echoed through the valley, Kalon reached for his bow, only to find Tayen already walking toward the sound. 3 nights after the chief's command, the desert turned silver under a full moon. The wind carried the low hum of night creatures, the faint rustle of leaves, and something else. something restless. Kalon couldn't sleep. He sat near the fire's dying embers, sharpening an arrowhead between his fingers. Every so often, his gaze drifted toward the tent where Tayen slept. He didn't mean to, but his eyes found her shadow easily, light, unguarded, like a flame that refused to go out. A sudden howl tore through the silence. Then another. Wolves. Kalon stood instantly, bow in hand. He moved toward Tayen's tent, ready to ensure she stayed inside. But the flap was already open. She was gone, his jaw clenched. He followed her tracks, light prints in the sand leading toward the ridge. The wolves' cries grew louder, echoing across the stone. When he finally saw her, she was standing near the edge of the plateau, her back to him, her hair wild in the wind. The moonlight washed her dress in silver, and she looked almost like one of the spirits the old women spoke of. Beautiful and doomed. Kalon's voice was sharp when it reached her. "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" She didn't turn. "They're just wolves. They're not pets." "I know," she said softly, "but they don't attack without reason. They call to each other like we do." He came closer, bow still drawn. "You should be in camp." She turned then, eyes defiant. "I should be free." For a moment, the world stood still. Just her voice against the night, the scent of sage and smoke lingering between them. Kalon lowered his bow, though his heartbeat didn't slow. "Your father trusted me with your life. You can't keep walking into danger." Her gaze flicked to his hands, steady, strong, calloused. "And who trusted you with mine?" she asked quietly. He froze. Her words hit deeper than any arrow. On their walk back to camp, silence hung between them. The wolves had quieted, their cries fading into the distance. Tayen walked ahead, her steps light but her presence heavy in his chest. "Why do you follow orders so easily?" she asked suddenly. "Because men die when they don't." "Maybe," she said, glancing back at him. "But sometimes they live more when they disobey." Kalon looked away. He wasn't a man of many words, but she had a way of tearing into the ones he buried. He wondered if she even realized it, how her defiance chipped at his restraint piece by piece. The next morning, Chief Nail sent a small group of warriors north to scout new hunting ground. Kalon was ordered to stay behind, to keep guarding Tayen. She didn't like that. "You should be out there," she told him, "not wasting time shadowing me." He leaned against a wooden post, arms crossed. "I don't waste time when I'm ordered to protect a chief's daughter." "I'm not porcelain," she muttered. "I never said you were." "Then stop treating me like it." Kalon exhaled slowly. "I'm treating you like someone whose death would start a war." That silenced her for a moment. Then softer. "And what about your death?" He looked at her surprised. "If you die protecting me, who would mourn you?" she asked. His answer came after a long pause. "No one needs to." That night, Tayen sat by the stream alone. The stars shimmered above, clear and sharp against the black sky. Her reflection trembled on the water's surface as she whispered to herself, "He doesn't even see me." But Kalon did. From the shadows of the trees, he watched her quietly, his fingers tightening around his bow. He told himself it was duty, but he knew better. He knew because when she stood and began to cross the shallow water, he stepped out before he could stop himself. "You shouldn't come here alone," he said, voice low. Tayen's expression softened, not angry this time, just curious. "You keep saying that like I'm fragile." He took a step closer. "You're not fragile. You're reckless," her breath caught. "And you care?" Kalon hesitated. Then quietly, "I'm not supposed to." A soft wind moved through the trees. For a moment, neither spoke. The night pressed close around them, heavy and alive. Tayen's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She wanted to push him, make him admit something, anything, but his eyes, dark and unreadable, warned her not to. So she only smiled faintly. "Then you're already failing, warrior." She brushed past him, her shoulder barely grazing his arm, but it was enough to make him inhale sharply. Enough to remind him that his promise, to never touch her, was already cracking at the edges. and as she disappeared into the campfire glow, Kalon realized what the wolves had been warning him about all along. It wasn't danger outside the camp. It was the one walking inside it. The days grew warmer. The air carried the scent of wildflowers and the slow hum of insects, but Kalon couldn't find peace in any of it. Every time Tayen was near, the world around him blurred into something dangerous, something he couldn't fight with weapons. She'd begun testing him more boldly now. Disappearing from camp without warning, sneaking into the hunting grounds, wandering past the borders at dusk. It wasn't just rebellion, it was a game, and she wanted to see how far she could push him before he'd break. That afternoon, she did it again. Kalon spotted her horse's tracks heading south toward the dry canyon. He followed on foot, jaw tight, the sun burning against his back. When he finally found her, she was standing by a shallow pool, collecting herbs in her hands, her dress brushed against her knees, wet from the water, her hair loose and glinting in sunlight. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said. She didn't turn. "You keep finding me. Maybe I'm not alone after all. Tayen," he said, voice sharp this time. That got her attention. She turned, and for a heartbeat, the teasing in her eyes softened. "You sound like my father when you say my name like that. Then maybe you should listen like his daughter. Maybe you should stop pretending you're not tempted," she said, quietly. The words hit like a spark in dry grass. Kalon froze. The wind stilled. The distance between them felt thinner than it should. He took a step forward before he realized it, then stopped himself. "You don't understand what you're saying, don't I?" He looked away. "You think this is a game, but one day you'll cross a line even I can't pull you back from." Tayen smiled faintly, her tone softer now. "Maybe that's what I want." He said nothing. He couldn't. Not when every word from her lips was a test of control he barely held. That evening, a storm rolled in from the mountains. The wind tore through the valley, thunder rumbling like distant drums. Tayen's tent struggled against the force of it, and Kalon, restless, went to secure it. "Go inside," he told her. She crossed her arms. "You're ordering me around again. I'm keeping you alive." Lightning cracked overhead, and the sudden downpour hit hard. Tayen gasped as the wind whipped through her hair, rain soaking her dress. Kalon caught the edge of the tent's rope, steadying it, but the next gust tore it free, sending them both stumbling under the weight of wind and water. He caught her before she fell, his hands gripping her arms. For a second, they just stared at each other, the sound of rain around them, her breath catching, his fingers still on her skin. Neither moved. Kalon let go first, stepping back as if burned. "You should stay inside." Tayen's lips trembled, part defiance, part confusion. "You keep saving me, Kalon, but you never look at me." He turned away. "Because if I do, I won't stop." The rain drowned the rest of his words. Later, when the storm finally faded, the camp was silent except for the hiss of wet embers. Tayen sat under the edge of the broken tent, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She thought of him, the way his hands had felt, steady and firm, the way he pulled away like it hurt him. She hated that part of herself that wanted him to break his promise. When she looked up, he was sitting by the fire again, his back to her, hair dripping rainwater down his neck. The red and brown sash clung to his waist, darkened by the storm. He was a man built for control, but even the strongest fire burned through its own walls eventually. The next morning, Chief Nail announced a journey north, to meet another tribe for trade. Kalon would accompany Tayen and a few others for protection. As they rode out, Tayen glanced sideways at him. "Are you ever going to speak to me again?" He didn't answer. "Fine," she said. "Then I'll make you." She spurred her horse forward, racing ahead, her laughter echoing through the canyon. Kalon cursed under his breath and followed. The path narrowed between cliffs, shadows crawling across the stone. Then she screamed. Her horse had stumbled near loose ground. She slipped, sliding toward the edge, clutching a thin branch jutting from the side. Kalon jumped from his saddle, rushing forward. He caught her wrist just as the branch snapped. Their eyes locked, hers wide with fear, his jaw tight with effort. He pulled her up in one swift motion, the force sending them both tumbling onto solid ground. For a long moment he didn't let go. Her heart pounded against his chest. "You can let go now," she whispered. "I can't," he said quietly, still catching his breath. And for the first time, he didn't try to hide the truth. They reached the northern plains by dusk. The air was thinner there, cooler, with the scent of pine and smoke drifting from faraway camps. Kalon rode ahead, his eyes always scanning the horizon. Tayen followed behind, quiet for once. She hadn't spoken much since the canyon. When they made camp, the others built fires and unpacked supplies. Kalon chose a spot away from the others, open ground with a clear view of the valley. Tayen came to sit nearby without asking. He didn't look at her. "You should stay with the rest." "I'm safer here," she said simply. He frowned. "Why?" "Because you're here." He wanted to say something, anything, but words caught in his throat. The fire crackled between them, and she leaned forward, the light catching her face. She didn't look like a chief's daughter now. She looked like someone who belonged to the wild as much as he did. "Do you ever stop watching the horizon?" she asked. "When danger never stops coming," he replied. "Maybe danger's closer than you think." Their eyes met, and something inside him shifted, quiet but undeniable. Later, after the others had fallen asleep, the fire burned low. The night sky was wide and endless, a sweep of stars so bright it felt unreal. Tayen sat awake, hugging her knees. She couldn't sleep either. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, his face in the rain, his hands pulling her back from the edge. She stood and walked toward the ridge where the view opened into the valley. The air was cold, brushing against her bare arms. She didn't hear Kalon approach until he was standing beside her. "You shouldn't wander alone at night," he said quietly. She smiled without looking at him. "You always find me when I do." Kalon said nothing. The stars reflected faintly in her eyes, and for the first time, he let himself look. Really look. She wasn't a mission, not a command. She was a living thing that refused to be caged. "Do you ever wonder if promises can break?" Tayen asked softly. He turned to her. "Promises don't break." "People do." Her voice dropped. "Then what if I make you break?" He exhaled, slow and heavy. "Then I'd have to leave before I do." "Would you?" The silence stretched between them. The fire behind them flickered, its light faint against the starlit sky. Kalon stepped closer. He could feel the warmth of her skin, the faint scent of rain still clinging to her hair. "Don't test me, Tayen," he said quietly. "I already am." Her words trembled like a spark before flame. Kalon closed his eyes. He could hear his own pulse. Every rule, every restraint, every command from her father, all of it vanished in that single heartbeat. He opened his eyes, and they were too close now. He reached out, fingers brushing the side of her face. Her breath hitched, and neither of them moved. The world around them, wind, stars, distant wolves, blurred into nothing. Then he pulled his hand back like it burned. "I told your father I'd protect you," he said, voice rough. "Not destroy you." Tayen looked at him, her throat tight. "Maybe you can't protect someone from what they want." Kalon turned away, his control cracking under the weight of her words. "Go to sleep, Tayen." She didn't move. "Good night, warrior," she whispered, her voice faint and aching. And when he finally walked away, she watched him go, knowing something had changed forever. That night, Kalon didn't sleep. The fire kept dying and he kept feeding it back to life. Maybe because if it went out, he'd see her in his dreams again. He whispered to the flames, low enough that no one could hear. "Spirit, help me keep this promise, before it kills me." The dawn came slowly over the northern plains, painting the valley in muted shades of gold and gray. Kalon woke stiff and weary, the ache in his muscles from the previous day's ride still lingering. But the weight pressing on his chest wasn't from physical exhaustion. It was something far heavier, something he could neither name nor escape. He rose quietly, careful not to wake Tayen, who still slept in the blanket-draped shelter of their small camp. Her breathing was steady, calm, innocent, or at least it appeared so. Kalon knelt by the fire to add another log, the flames hissing and spitting as they caught. His mind replayed the night over and over. The closeness, the brush of her skin, the unbearable pull he had fought to resist. He hated how much of her lingered with him. The scent of rain in her hair, the faint warmth of her presence, the way she laughed quietly even when danger hovered near. It gnawed at him. That night, sleep finally took him, though it was not rest. He dreamed. In the dream, the camp was quiet, bathed in moonlight, but it was different, blurred and shimmering, almost unreal. Tayen was there, standing in the center of the clearing. Her black hair flowed freely, catching the pale light, her dress brushing the grass as if it had a life of its own. "Kalon," she whispered. The sound of her voice was like wind through dry grass, soft and impossible to ignore. His heart hammered in his chest even though he wasn't awake. He stepped closer in the dream, reaching for her, and she stepped forward too, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. "Tayen," he said, his voice hoarse, almost breaking. She smiled faintly, and the shadows of the night swirled around them. She was laughing softly, low and musical, and her hand reached toward his. Kalon felt his control slipping, a dangerous warmth igniting inside him, and he leaned in, his fingers trembling to touch the fine line of her jaw. And then he called her name again, this time in his sleep. "Tayen." She answered in return, her voice carrying urgency and warmth. "Kalon." The sound of it, the way she said his name, shook him awake, gasping for air, sweat clinging to his skin. His heart wouldn't stop racing. He sat upright in the tent, staring at the low fire, trying to wrestle control back into his chest. Her name lingered in his throat, forbidden yet insistent, like a spark threatening to ignite a flame. He couldn't deny it anymore. His body, his mind, his very being ached for her. He had promised. He had sworn. He had to protect her. And yet the dream had reminded him that even in sleep, he failed. Kalon buried his face in his hands. The only sound was the crackling fire, the distant caw of a raven, and the soft whisper of the wind. Morning brought with it the business of the tribe. They were to move further north to meet the allied group, and Kalon rode alongside Tayen, silent as always. She didn't comment on the previous night, didn't acknowledge the way he had stared into the fire as if seeking answers he could not give. She didn't need to. He could feel her eyes on him, tracing him, testing him silently, and that was worse than any word. By midday, the group paused near a river to rest. Tayen dismounted, walking barefoot along the water's edge, her dress brushing against her ankles. Kalon followed, staying a careful distance behind, aware of every move she made. But his mind wandered back to the dream, to the soft way she had whispered his name, to the aching pull he had felt in his chest. He had to fight every instinct, every desire to remain steadfast. That night, as they set camp beneath the skeletal shadows of pines, Kalon struggled to sleep again. He built the fire with methodical precision, each log placed carefully, each spark coaxed to life. The warmth of the flames did little to soothe the storm inside him. Tayen sat nearby, tending her own small fire for cooking, humming softly to herself. Without realizing it, Kalon's eyes found her, tracing the curve of her shoulders, the subtle movement of her hands as she worked. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to look away. But sleep was inevitable, and when it came, it brought the dream again, more vivid, more intimate than before. This time, the dream was darker. Rain poured in torrents, thunder rolling across the valley. Tayen was there, drenched, her dress clinging to her, hair plastered to her face. Kalon's hands reached for her instinctively, the bow forgotten at his side. "Kalon," she cried, voice breaking through the storm. "Tayen," he answered, his own voice trembling, echoing through the dreamscape. They were closer than before, bodies almost touching. He could feel the heat radiating from her, smell the rain and wildflowers mingling in her hair. He wanted, needed, to pull her into his arms, to shelter her, to touch her in a way that went beyond protection. The dream held him, consumed him, until he woke with a start, heart racing and chest tight. Sweat dripped down his temple. The fire had burned low again. He whispered to the night air, barely audible. "Spirit, help me. I cannot. Morning came. Tayen watched him as he rose and tended the fire, noting the tension in his shoulders, the haunted look in his eyes. She didn't speak. She never did when she saw him like this, but her silence was a question all its own. Later, as the group packed to move again, she came close, brushing past him. Their hands accidentally touched, fingers grazing lightly. Neither spoke. Kalon felt the spark ignite instantly, a reminder of the night, of the dream, of the impossible pull between them. "Careful," he murmured, voice low, almost a warning. "Or what?" she whispered back, eyes glinting with mischief. "Or I might forget myself." She smiled, a faint, knowing curve of lips, and walked on. Kalon's jaw tightened. He couldn't admit it, couldn't act on it, couldn't even think about it without danger shadowing every step. But deep down, he knew. The promise he had made, the vow to never touch her, to never give in, it was already breaking, and he was powerless to stop it. The day began quietly, but the air carried a strange tension, thick and restless. The group moved steadily north, following a narrow river that wound like a silver ribbon through the plains. Kalon rode slightly ahead, his eyes scanning every hill, every tree line, every shadow. Tayen followed behind, riding with quiet grace, her black hair loose over her shoulders, catching the sunlight as if she belonged to the wind itself. She had been testing him more openly now, subtly brushing against him when passing, allowing a glance to linger too long, whispering just loud enough to make him catch her words. Kalon was painfully aware of each act, each spark she threw into the fire he tried to contain. By mid-afternoon, they reached a canyon narrow and deep, walls of rock rising sharply on either side. The horses slowed, wary of the uneven ground. Tayen dismounted, moving ahead to scout, and Kalon's chest tightened with every step she took. "You're taking unnecessary risks," he said, voice low. "I've always known how to handle myself," she replied, not looking at him. "Not in this terrain," he insisted, stepping closer. "One misstep and—" She cut him off with a laugh, light and teasing. "You're overprotective." "I'm alive," he said evenly. "That's the difference." The canyon grew narrower, and suddenly the wind shifted. Dust rose in swirling columns, and a distant rumble echoed against the cliffs. The group tensed. Kalon's instincts screamed. He dismounted, moving toward Tayen, whose horse had stopped, ears pinned back. The first rock slide was subtle at first, small stones tumbling down. But the rumble grew louder, and then it came, a cascade of boulders crashing down the canyon with terrifying force. "Move," Kalon shouted. Tayen reacted instantly, stepping forward, trying to guide her horse to safety. But the ground shifted beneath her, and she slipped. In a heartbeat, Kalon was at her side, catching her arm and yanking her out of the way, just as a boulder struck where she had been standing seconds before. Her breath hitched, eyes wide with fear, and for the first time, she allowed herself to cling to him, holding onto his arm as though it were the only solid thing in the chaos. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough, almost lost in the roar of falling rock. She nodded, voice trembling. I think so." He didn't let go. Not immediately. The danger had passed, but the pulse of adrenaline left a fire burning in their chests, a tension that had nothing to do with the rocks. Night fell after the canyon ordeal, heavier and more oppressive than before. The group camped on open ground near the river, the water reflecting the pale moonlight. Kalon could barely think. He kept replaying her in his mind. The way her hair had plastered to her face from dust and sweat, the small gasp of fear she had made as he pulled her to safety, the warmth of her skin pressed against his in that brief, chaotic moment. He tried to sleep, but sleep came like a knife through cloth, fleeting and jagged. When it finally took him, the dream returned, more vivid and intimate than ever. In the dream, they were alone, the camp gone, replaced by the moonlit canyon from earlier. Rocks still lay scattered across the ground, Tayen stumbled just as she had before. He reached for her, catching her wrist. "Kalon," she whispered, her voice both terrified and tender. "Tayen," he breathed, the sound of her name breaking something inside him. In the dream, there was no restraint. Their bodies were impossibly close, and Kalon could feel every curve, every breath, every heartbeat. He said her name again, low and trembling. "Tayen, Tayen," and she answered, equally soft, equally unrestrained. "Kalon." "Kalon!" He woke with a start, gasping for air, sweat coating his skin. The fire had dwindled to a faint glow. His chest heaved, and for a moment, he could barely tell the difference between dream and reality. Morning came, gray and quiet. Kalon was restless. Tayen had been awake before him, standing by the river, her reflection in the water. He watched her from a distance, heart aching, throat tight, the memory of the dream burning inside him. She turned suddenly, catching his gaze. "You're awake early," she said, voice calm, almost teasing. "I can't sleep," he admitted, his voice low. "Neither could I," she said softly, stepping closer. "I saw you in my dreams, too." His pulse jumped, and the world seemed to narrow to the space between them. "Did you—" "Yes," she whispered. I called your name." Kalon's jaw tightened. Every vow, every promise, every rule he had lived by, all of it was unraveling in the face of this undeniable pull. He swallowed hard. We can't let this happen." Her eyes were steady, daring him, testing him in the same way she always had. "Maybe it already has," she said, and with that she turned, walking toward the rest of the group. Kalon remained by the river, watching her go, hands clenching, knowing the line he swore never to cross was bending dangerously, and that one day he might not be able to stop it. The night fell silently, a heavy cloak over the northern plains. The fires of their camp burned low, flickering against the dark, and the wind carried the scent of distant pines and damp earth. Kalon sat apart from the others, his posture rigid, jaw tight, hands clasped together. Tayen moved through the camp, her black hair brushing her shoulders, the bead headband glinting faintly in the firelight. She approached him, careful, almost hesitant, but Kalon didn't look up. "You're quiet tonight," she said softly, kneeling across from him. "I'm always quiet," he replied, voice rough but calm. "Not like this," she said, eyes searching his. "You've been elsewhere, like something is pulling at you can't fight." He exhaled slowly. "It is pulling at me," he admitted finally. The words felt like fire leaving his lips. "It's you, Tayen." Her breath caught, and for a long moment neither spoke. The crackle of the campfire and the distant howl of wolves were the only sounds. "I tried," he said, voice barely audible. I swore I would never touch you. But every day, every moment, it grows harder to hold back." Tayen's lips trembled. "Kalon." He leaned forward suddenly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. The touch was gentle, deliberate, and his eyes searched hers, as if asking permission without words. "Don't stop," she whispered. The restraint he had maintained for so long shattered like thin ice underfoot. Kalon's hands moved, tracing the curve of her jaw, the delicate line of her neck. She leaned into him instinctively, eyes closing, lips parting slightly. "I warned you," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. "I said I wouldn't let myself—" "Then let yourself," she said, urgent and low. "I don't want restraint, not anymore." The world outside ceased to exist. The flickering fire, the distant sounds of the camp, the wind through the pines. Everything faded until there was only them. Kalon pressed his forehead against hers, inhaling her scent, the warmth of her skin burning through the cool night air. "I never wanted to hurt you," he whispered, hands now resting firmly on her shoulders, feeling the subtle tension of muscles he had long admired from afar. "You're not hurting me," Tayen said, her voice trembling with relief and something deeper, something raw and unguarded. "You've been holding back because of promises that no longer matter." Kalon closed his eyes, letting go completely. He pulled her into a gentle, urgent embrace, holding her as though he could shield her from every danger in the world. She pressed against him, a silent acknowledgement of the fire that had been building between them for months, the pull that neither could resist any longer. The night deepened. Stars hung like cold lanterns overhead, indifferent to the human tension unfolding below. Kalon and Tayen remained wrapped in each other, the world outside reduced to shadows and whispers. He murmured her name again, this time awake and with intent. Tayen, she responded, a breathless echo of longing. Kalon. They stayed that way for hours, hands entwined, foreheads pressed together, hearts beating in a synchrony they had long denied. Every promise broken, every restraint abandoned, every unspoken desire finally given life. By morning, the air was cool and sharp, and the fires burned low but steady. The group stirred, moving quietly as if sensing the change in the bond between the warrior and the chief's daughter. Kalon and Tayen rose together, still close, hands brushing as they moved. Words were unnecessary now. Their actions, their closeness, spoke volumes. For the first time since their journey began, Kalon felt a sense of completeness. He had failed in his promise in the most profound way, not as a protector, but as a man who could no longer deny the pull of his own heart. And Tayen, for her part, had found in him not just a guardian, but someone who matched her courage, her fire, her wildness. The plains stretched out before them, endless and free. And for the first time, neither wanted to turn back.